The rules of play. These rules have been taken from the work of Thomas Wildgruber in his book Painting and Drawing in Waldorf Schools. These 7 rules can be used when you are planning your drawing and painting lessons for your class.
Number 1. A color composition can always start from contrasts between cold and warm, light and dark, or complementary colors.
We'll start here with the traditional yellow circle, lemon yellow paint with the Prussian blue background. This is a contrast that is very common between light and dark, as well as between warm and cold. If you were to use a golden yellow instead of the lemon yellow, you could accentuate the warmth against the cold of the blue. But here I'm bringing in a little bit more darkness to accentuate the value of light and dark. Because the darker the blue is next to the lightness of the yellow, it makes a stronger contrast. In the second painting, I'm working with ultramarine blue first to create a blue and orange complementary contrast. I'm being very rough in my stroke to show the roughness of the air and the roughness of the water. The splashing waves and the blowing wind. And the 40 days and the 40 nights of rain. Bringing in a little bit of Prussian blue to strengthen the water. Now comes a contrast. Using a smaller brush, I can paint the arc. Now bringing in a dry, clean brush, I can bring in the movement of the air and the rain. And this also brings in a contrast between light and dark because you're bringing the darkness of the ocean with the lightness of the sky.
Number 2. The color of a foreground figure should reappear in the background, creating harmony.
In this painting, I'm going to tell the story of the fox and the grapes. So I'm laying in a very warm background, lemon yellow, and it's stronger on the outside because I want to create the grapevine which will need a green color. In the middle, I create the warmth with the golden yellow. So a really nice contrast for the children, for them to see the difference between the warm yellow and the cool yellow. But I know I'm going to put the fox in red, and with the golden yellow in the middle, it will turn him more red-orange. Here at the bottom, I bring the Prussian blue to make the green of the grass and the green of the vine in the places where there's the thick, dark lemon yellow. A little extra blue for leaves and what will become the grapes. So drawing a fox is not quite as easy as you might think. I start with the body, and I have the head with the snout, and you can finesse it as you go, the ears. You're not going to get it exactly right the first time. And the children should know that there's a feeling that they're seeking, a feeling of fox, of his jumping legs and his great bushy tail. I'm using carmine red here, but because I'm doing it on a layer of golden yellow, it gives him the little orangey feeling to his red. And the white plume on the end of his tail. And now I'm adding a little bit of red to those blue grapes, turning them violet. And the rule of play recommends that you bring the color that's in the foreground into the background. So I'm going to warm up a portion of the background using a little bit of the carmine red. Not too strong, but a little bit of a sunsetty feeling. I know from past experiences when I was not following these rules of play, I would have stopped after coloring the grapes and I wouldn't have added this red. And the red, you can see, really gives it a sense of fullness and harmony.
Number 3. Contrast can be enhanced while painting. This allows the children to have an experience of transformation.
In this painting, I'm going to tell the story of Francis and Claire. And I start with a nice, warm, golden background. I make sure that it's not too heavy, having only put the brush in the paint once. I can spread the paint all across the paper, trying not to get the paper too wet. Then I add the ultramarine blue, which when it's mixed with the golden yellow, it makes kind of a murky greenish, breaks down the blue so it's kind of gray in order to create this form, this structure in the painting of archway, like you might see in a square in Italy where Francis lived. This also creates a contrast between warm and cold, so that you have the coolness of the archway and the warmth of the air. And in that warm space, I put St. Francis, who has ultramarine for his figure, showing a quiet, sensitive individual who's perhaps a little bit introverted, yet works very hard for the sake and care of others. So thinking about the blue qualities. So then we have Claire, who's in this bright red. She's a woman of wealth and means, and she comes to the square to hear him speak and is quite moved by the things that he has to say. Has her veil and her fancy hat and her fancy shoes, and she comes to hear him speak. And here the transformation can occur, where his words fill the space with golden light, a feeling of truth, a feeling of goodness, a beautiful primary colors here, red, blue, and yellow, a feeling of wholeness, and that truth and light change Claire, fills her heart and her soul with light, and therefore changing her dress to an orange color, which creates a stronger contrast with blue. I might add just a little bit more blue to Francis's cloak to make a little more contrast and give him a little bit of hair.
When colors adjoin each other, they enhance each other's effect if light borders dark and dark borders light.
This painting will show the expulsion of Adam and Eve from the garden in paradise. It will show the Archangel Michael with his flaming sword. I put in a very, very light ultramarine blue sky with a landscape on the upper half of the painting. And using the same ultramarine blue, I'm going to lightly paint in the figures of Adam and Eve. And they are outside of this land, really asking why. Why have we been sent away? It's important here when you're working with the students to have them wipe their brush very, very much before painting on the paper so that their color is very, very light. Bring in a little yellow to create the feeling of the green from the garden. Because it's so light, they just have to really just tickle the color in. Lemon yellow. And here comes the angel Michael, who's floating above the land, bright red for a feeling of seriousness and strength and perhaps a little bit of anger, being clear that they're no longer allowed. Using the golden yellow for his sword and giving him a little bit of a halo. A little shine on his garments. Then in a cap, I'm mixing red and yellow and blue and creating a very, very dark color. And I'm going to create the darkness into which Adam and Eve are sent, where the colors have been lost, the sense of wholeness and beauty are really sent out into a desert land, and we express that through the darkness. And different children will have created a different blend of colors, so some may be a little more greenish and some a little more purplish, and that doesn't really matter. But what you're trying to create is that contrast that you can see between the human beings and their backgrounds. And here I use the same dark to surround the sword in order to create the contrast, but I wasn't liking the way that was looking, so you'll see. I'm going to remove that. If you do it with your students, use the dark ultramarine blue. The ultramarine around the golden yellow creates the contrast that's required by the rule that says that to enhance the color, you can have dark against light and light against dark. And so I bring the blue lighter around the wings of the angel so that the darkness of the red has an opportunity to shine as well. And lastly, I come in with a painting eraser to correct any of the bleeding that occurs from the background into the light figures. Your students can practice their painting eraser here.
Contrasts can be made with only one color. Use the positive-negative principle to take space and make space.
This is a nice painting of a family of mice. The mouse that is outside the house is painted solid blue, ultramarine blue, and this is the process of taking space. So it is positive space that's painted with color. I take some time to create an area around him. Give him a floor to walk on, and then here's his little hole. Give it a nice little unusual shape. And maintaining the contrast between the dark of the mouse and the light of the background, I soften the blue background so that it still keeps the contrast that I'm looking for. Now thinking about the life in the mouse house, which is going to be dark, I'm going to take the time now to make space where the figures of the mice will stay white, and by working the brush in various ways, I can create the little mice figures with white and bring the contrast through the background. There's a negative space. This is very challenging for the children. One activity that you can do with crayon first, if you're a little worried that they might not be able to do this on their own right away. So here I have my family of mice that live in the dark. And taking my time to find the shape. The children might have trouble with bleeding, but what's really nice is if they work slowly with perhaps using a small brush. They could do a little bit of outlining. But trying really hard not to spend too much time with outlining. There's enough room underneath in the mouse house to make 3 or 4 mice. And if they mess up, they can just paint them out and put a smaller mouse somewhere else in the space. I'll give my upstairs mouse a little bit more contrast. And then I think I'm done.
Number 6. Small figures should be placed in front of larger figures, creating social perspective.
This painting will show the race between the hare and the tortoise. The tortoise will be the smaller figure, and so he will be in the front. I have considered the color. I want him to be more of a olivey green, so I've chosen a golden background, which is nice for the sunny day when it happens. And when I add the Prussian blue to the golden yellow, it makes a little bit of a olive green rather than a true green. Painting the tortoise first because he's in front. He's the smaller figure. Working him out so that he has nice shape. I'm going to bring in a little lemon yellow for his shell, give him a little brightness. And now comes the hare, who is going to be bigger and leaping behind him. His big long ears. His jumping paws. Very determined with his tail. And here, because his legs are behind the tortoise, I'm not going to spend a lot of time delineating them, but to know that his big feet are behind the tortoise, adding a little bit of orange to make that road dark. Bring a little bit of strength of blue into his legs, which begins this really nice contrast between the blue and the orange. The blue is in the foreground, so I'm going to also bring, like in one of our earlier rules, I'm going to bring a little bit of blue into the background at the end, you'll see. So here, give a little detail on his shell. Some Prussian blue in to make the contrast. Between the rabbit. Remember, the blue and the orange make this nice complementary contrast as well. I'm going to leave the golden yellow around his face to show his determination. The angry, hard-working rabbit wanting to race, and the calm, hard-working tortoise, slow and steady.
Number 7. Ensure that the proportions of the picture are an undeniable reality. Seek inner or hidden structure. What this rule really means is that when you are creating your picture, you always want to consider any kind of compositional structure in your picture which could bring the eye traveling through the picture, whether it's through diagonals, triangular form, or a rectangle, so that there's always a sense of structure inside the painting, and that the characters are not just placed anywhere on the picture plane, that you might have one character here and one character here, and there is a relationship that works in a diagonal, or that there's one character behind another, so that you have the feeling of a triangle. Just as in classic art making, there is always some form of structure, even perhaps a circle. So when you're structuring your painting, always seek that structure and try your best to include it in your planning process, because even if it's not a conscious activity that the children are including it, it's your intention that lives underneath the image.
When working with the rules of play, it is not necessary to use all the rules all the time. But when you sit down to plan a lesson for painting or drawing, pick one or two of the rules. You have your subject, and then you have the rules, and then you have a little bit of substance from which to formulate your image. I have found these rules to change my approach, and all of my work has become much stronger and much more stable because they have these rules for color composition enmeshed in them. They have this integrity that I haven't experienced before. So I hope you make use of them, and that your painting and your drawing becomes much more successful and fulfilling. Thanks for watching.